Welcome, everybody, to the ROI Online Podcast. And today I'm excited to introduce you to Rick Turner. Rick Turner is one of the leading real estate listing and selling agent. He's a part of a leading team in Hilton Head Island there in South Carolina. Rick's also a client of ours. Rick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Steve. Glad to be here.
Hey, I'm excited to have you on today. First of all, you're a client that we really appreciate, and your account and this project's been very fulfilling for our team, and so we just enjoy working with you. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
Oh, we've enjoyed it. I would think more than they have, because we're seeing the results.
Love it, love it. So let's learn a little bit about Rick. Rick one day showed up in Hilton Head with his wife for a visit, and after 2 days decided, honey, this is where we're going to set up camp.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that story, Rick.
Well, we were school teachers in Indiana, and we'd been out of college for 3 years, and we had decided we were going to do something else and didn't know what. So we came to Hilton Head and thought, well, maybe we'll get a job here. I'd been in door-to-door sales when I was in college, and several of the fellows that I worked with in college were down here, and they were doing really well on Hilton Head Island. So my wife and I came down. We thought, well, maybe we'll work there for a year or two, make enough money for me to go back to school and get a master's or a PhD or something. And so we got here, and it wasn't 2 days. It might have been 2 hours. It's the beach. It's palmetto trees. It's huge live oak trees with Spanish moss hanging off. It just was idyllic. Idyllic. And so, long story short, after, 2, 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever it was, I said to her, we definitely, if they'll give us a job, even as a janitor, we ought to move here. And fortunately, they gave me a job in real estate, selling real estate, and that was 1972. So I have been in real estate for 48 years.
Wow. So I guess a lot of people, they may come and go in that industry, but you're one of the stalwarts there. You've been leading successful teams for a long time.
A long time.
Is that the similar experience most people that come there for a visit? Do they get this aspirational image, or that it becomes a part of the dream that they want to move there?
Well, I think most of us grew up dreaming of a laid back beach lifestyle at some point in our teen years, young adult years. We were in college or whatever, and of course college students go to beaches for spring break and so on. So I think we all think about that. And here I am, and here's my wife and me, young couple and everything, and this is, just so happens that Hilton Head Island on the East Coast is the crown jewel of a wonderful family-oriented beach. In fact, Condé Nast magazine for the last 3 years in a row has named it the #1 island in the United States. Not the continental United States, but the United States. That includes the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. I don't know why too many people want to go there, except to go fishing, I think. But it includes a Hawaiian island. And so there's something very special. So here we are. Here's this opportunity to live a dream that most young people have. And so it was hard to turn down. And then because it's such a wonderful place, so special. Lots of other people want to move here. So if you're a realtor here, there's a lot more likelihood that somebody will want to buy a house from you, or a condominium, or a lot and build, than maybe some other beach area.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so as a realtor, you end up having a pretty good living because it's a nice place.
Well, I would bet that not all realtors have the same experience as you. When you talk about the team that you were with for a while, started at number 143 in the ranking of the teams around that area, and then to end up number 9. I mean, that's a big transition when you show up. You must have some passion. Obviously, it's very apparent when we're talking to you how you smile about living there, and why you were so drawn to that area. It would make sense to me that someone with that passion would really be good at helping me sell my house to someone that's considering to come there or to move there. Wrong?
Mm-hmm. No, right. I mean, I've been a sales, as I think I mentioned, when I was in college, I sold books, Bibles, door to door for a huge company that employed about 5,000 college students every summer.
Yes.
So I really learned to sell. If you can sell something door to door, you learn to sell. So, but over the years, my selling philosophy has matured, and I ended up becoming a sales trainer and part owner of several real estate companies. And I was a teacher. Okay. So I love to help new agents, new realtors be very successful. But in the process of all that, I'm very much of a learner. I go to all kinds of conferences and everything, read books on sales and marketing. And so as part of that, I've honed a whole philosophy of sales. and I think what I'm going to share with you now, I don't think I've ever heard a sales trainer say this, but the most important thing in my philosophy of selling, the most important characteristic a good salesperson could have, whether they're selling insurance or real estate or computers or whatever, is love. Mm-hmm. If you love the other the customer, and you want what's best for the customer, then trust develops, and you become, instead of a salesperson, you become a trusted advisor. Mm-hmm. And so to me, love is the most important. It goes back to the 60s, what were all the songs about? All you need is love. But a salesperson who loves his customer and wants to fulfill the customer's needs more than the desire to get a commission or an income, then that salesperson does long-term way better. So, you alluded to 5 years ago, I started a real estate company, and just a tiny little company. And there were 143 companies in our area, and we were number 143. We were nothing. And within 3 years, we grew it to the 9th biggest company in 3 years. And the owners were Canadians, and so they decided after 3 years to sell it and take their profit and move on. So I went back, instead of running a company, I went back into day-to-day working with buyers and sellers. But what a thrill that was to watch the agents. So my job at that point was to sell realtors on becoming better at their job. So anyway, so I don't know. Someday maybe I'll write a book about how to be a loving salesperson or something. We have to think of something better than that, and you could help me with that.
Yeah, I would love to read that book. Here, you were talking about that, and I allude to it in my book, or I talk about it in my book, how the problem with sales right now is when a salesperson is just trying to make their quota, then
Yep.
they don't care whether it's the right thing or not for their
Hmm.
prospects. They just
Hmm.
want to make their quota. And
Hmm.
what you're saying is that you're echoing that if we're looking at the relationship and that's the most important thing and what's the best thing, then you're playing the long
Hmm.
game, but it goes to relationship, not quota.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and and the our brains are always discerning whether we can trust and if we're safe, and just comes through. It's your brain, that part of the brain that's evaluating and being your bodyguard and keeping you safe. It doesn't process language, and but no decision is made unless it goes to that part of the brain. And so that part of the brain, your bodyguard, is evaluating this relationship. And as soon as
Hmm.
it doesn't feel safe, then we get this feeling in our gut. I don't know if I, and we don't even think about it out loud. We react. And so what you're pinging that part of the brain, you're letting that part of the
Hmm.
brain know, look, I'm looking out for you. I'm on your side, is ultimately what's going on.
Yeah. Let me share something with you that I learned years ago. I was I was a Bible teacher for an evening Bible study,
Mhm.
and um, and I was being trained on how to prepare the lectures, and I learned a very interesting thing. Somebody way back, Aristotle or something, said um, that, uh, and I don't. Let me see if I can get this right. That the three aspects of communication between people are, first of all, logos,
Mhm.
which is the words you use,
Mhm.
logos.
Logic, yeah.
The second is pathos. That's the emotion, the passion that you display, and that's very powerful, more powerful than the words.
Mhm.
But the most powerful, that Aristotle or Sophocles or one of those guys came up with, the most powerful uh, element of communication is ethos. That's the character of the person that is communicating.
Mhm.
Okay, and and if you think about it, what made Billy Graham great, his words were great, his passion was outstanding, but his ethos, his
Mhm.
character was extraordinary.
Mhm.
And so it enabled him to communicate as well as any preacher ever communicated, at least in the last 100 years.
Yeah. Awesome.
So
Actions.
logos, ethos, logos, pathos, and ethos.
Ethos. L LPE.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
ethos is like ethic.
Ethics. Yes. Actions. You can People's actions are congruent with their words.
Hmm.
Then you feel better about them. But if it's not, you start going, what's going on, or something amiss. Right now we find ourselves, speaking of something amiss, we're in the middle of this shelter in place, quarantine, all this concern about what's going on in the economy and the virus epidemic right now. And I imagine there's a lot of people that you would be working with. This has triggered some questions and some thoughts about what they should be considering in this situation right now. Interest rates are falling. People are confronting all sorts of things that they didn't expect. The future has changed from just 6 weeks ago for many people. What would, if someone was to, if, if someone had questions about what's going on right now, tell me what those questions might be, and then what would be your advice. You're an old dog in that area. You've been leading the pack, so to speak, and it's obvious that people trust you and that you're very effective when people list their homes with you. Um, Talk to us about that.
Well, one of the big questions that people have right now is, should I buy a house now? You know, after the Great Recession, people who bought in the first year of the recession saw their property value decline. You know, and normally if you buy in a recession, the recession is over in a year and things start to kind of go back up. Well, in the Great Recession, it didn't happen that way. Somebody who bought in 2007 saw that their property that they had purchased for whatever $800,000 was now worth $720 a year later, and a year after that was worth $660, and a year after that was worth maybe $590. You know, it kept going down, down, down. So one of the questions that people wonder now is, should I buy? It's all, most people that we deal with have owned homes before. I mean, have owned homes now, own a home or homes now, and they're in their 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s, and so they understand, because they've got some maturity in life. They understand now's a good time to, or during a recession, it's a good time to buy. If you can afford it, it's a great time to buy. But after the Great Recession, they wonder, well, is this just the beginning of another decline? Okay. Or are we is this going to be a year-long thing like a typical recession is? Not that this is typical in any way, but a recession normally lasts 6 months. And of course, no one knows. This is an unprecedented thing. All I can say to people is, live your best life now. It is an excellent time to buy. Will we have a V-shaped recession that goes down this month and next month, and then begins to climb back to normal maybe by the end of the year? I don't know. Is it going to be a long 2-year process to get back to normal? No one knows. But what I do know is that interest rates are great. It's a great time to buy. Sellers are they're definitely more flexible today than they were 6 weeks ago. They're realizing, hey, now, if I can get a buyer today, it's a good time to get a buyer. And then move on to the dream of living at the beach, or the dream of living at the lake, or the dream of moving to Cleveland, if that's what your dream is. Whatever your dream is, embrace it and enjoy it now, because people that wait and wait and wait, what'll happen is next year, if things are good, they'll be like, oh gee, I missed my opportunity. I coulda, woulda, shoulda. So and everybody's got to decide for themselves, is this the right time for me? But it is a great time to buy. Between interest rates and flexible sellers, it is a great time to buy. Whether they should wait or not, they're going to have to decide that.
Yeah. So one concern might be is that, well, people can't come over, or do I want people coming in my house right now to look around at the house? What are some of the solutions that you could offer? It seems like those are easier hurdles to overcome now than it used to be.
Yeah, that most sellers, we are showing houses to buyers and making sales. I mean, normally at this time of year, we'd probably sell 1.5 houses per week, and we're only doing about one a week. Okay, so it's down somewhat. People are looking, and what we do is we take a Lysol wipe, and we, the realtor, open all doors, and we have the customers touch nothing, and most sellers are fine with that. I mean, I did have a seller last weekend that wanted everybody to wear masks and rubber glove, or the plastic gloves, and so that's fine. But most people are happy to have their homes shown, and as long as we're careful, very relaxed about it.
So you've been a leader in marketing. I think one of the things that I remember about in our first conversation is how you've been progressive in your marketing of how you approach marketing in your industry for your sellers. And talk to us about, in our project here, we've ended up with a really cool program that you've rolled out that no one else has in your area, and it's called Upsell.
Mm. Yep, yep.
Tell us about that.
Well, Steve, the relationship that we had with your team, we did Zoom meetings, and it was very collaborative, and they asked a lot of great questions that I think you had probably designed. And so we would do our homework, and then we would collaborate with each other. And I have a partner, and we would then collaborate with your team. And in the process of all that, we came, and it all started with the foundation of the StoryBrand book, which takes the focus. 99% of realtors portray themselves as the heroes. I mean, we're the best. We'll get the best prices for you. We are amazing. We'll find you the best properties. We'll get you the best prices. And it's the realtor. And we sell more than anybody else. We're the number one realtor in this market, so on and so forth. So the realtor in our market here, and I think it's, I go to all kinds of conferences and everything, and I think realtors all over America and all over probably the North America and maybe the world are the same. 99% of them are, we are amazing. We'll do wonders for you. Well, the whole StoryBrand concept, as of course you know, and perhaps most of your followers on this podcast know, the StoryBrand concept is that the customer is the hero. And that kind of goes back to that love concept. But the customer's the hero, and we're the guide. We're there to help them move, in our case, move on to their next adventure. For, a computer company, maybe their goal is to help them move on to a better computer so that they can do things that they want to do faster or more effectively. So what we did with your team is we came up through this collaborative approach and at one point, well, I remember on your website there was a program called Quick Start. And I thought that was very impressive that you had a named program. It wasn't just, hey, here's what we do for you. It was, hey, get involved with this Quick Start program, and here's what it is to help you and accomplish your goals. So we were talking about what could we name a program to help people sell their homes most effectively. And one of your team members said, what about upsell? And then we I guess you call that an acronym. Is that acronym? Okay. Yeah. An acronym, and the U stood for unique selling proposition. The P stood for pivotal photography, and so on and so forth. And we created a whole brand around that, just like you have Quick Start. Okay. Well, we have upsell. We should have called it Upstart. And I learned years ago that if you name something, if you give something a name, it has more value, and we're getting it registered trademark and everything. We aren't going to, because of the coronavirus pandemic, we aren't going to roll it out until we get 2 or 3 months down the road. Okay. Because we don't want, there's several reasons for that. The timing, a lot of our sellers go away for the summer.
Mm.
A lot of our property owners go away for the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to give it 2 or 3 months before we roll it out. But, I think it's extremely impressive. Nothing like it. There's no realtor around here that makes the customer the hero. There's no realtor that has a platform that they called named anything that is an organized platform in which to help people accomplish their goal of moving on to their next adventure in life. So it's completely unique in the marketplace. And then what was terrific, and I know this isn't an advertisement for your company necessarily, but what was terrific is your team came up with graphics that are so beautiful and compelling that it just makes, everybody that sees what we're doing, and we've only rolled it out to 5 or 6 people, are like, wow, that looks great. It's just impressive to take great concepts and give beautiful graphics to go along with great concepts. And of course, all great brands do that.
I think it's great that you're walking that walk, because you're demonstrating how you take care of your stuff, that's the way you're going to take care of your customers as well. You're going to put as much effort into the details and the professionalism and the process of helping them sell their house at the best value. We love working with progressive-minded business folks. That's what we just gel with them, and that has always impressed me about you since the first time that we talked. So the Turner Rudd team. How many people are in the Turner Rudd team?
Well, in the process of all this, we became Turner and Rudd Group.
I'm sorry. That's
okay. So we're now Turner and Rudd Group. We've got there's 8 of us in our group, and five of us are licensed realtors. My partner and me. And then there's 3 realtors who only work with buyers. And then there's we have a business manager and a marketing manager and a internet marketing consultant that we work very intensely with.
So Turner Rudd Group, most real estate folks that you would work with are usually 1 or 2 man teams, and they average $2 million in sales a year, but you guys are doing like 27 million or so.
Yeah, last year we did 27 and a half, somewhere in there.
So the odds of you being successful as a group are increased instead of just being a solo real estate agent.
Well, and it gives us, we've been, what happened is years ago we figured out, and you and I were talking early on. You called me Turner the Learner, and for some reason, as a school teacher, I got very much into learning. I wanted to be as good a teacher as I could be. When my wife and I got married, or before we got married, I wanted to learn about being a husband. What does a good husband do? I didn't do very well the first year, but I figured if I'm going to be married, I want to learn to be a good husband. So I read a lot of books, and we went to conferences and so on. Same way with being a parent, and same way with being a realtor. And in the process of all that learning through the years, I'll never forget a little axiom that I heard somebody say, that readers are leaders. And boy, do I believe that. When I read a book, and now I listen to books sometimes as I'm walking, it inspires me. Your book inspired me, the Golden Toilet. StoryBrand inspired me. But anyway, in the process of all that reading and going to conferences and learning, readers are leaders, learners. We have to come up with another thing. Learners are winners or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. But learners are leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Learners are leaders.
There you go.
That works. That dog hunts, as they'd say here in the South. Learners are leaders. And so years ago, back in about 2003 or 4, I came to find out there were realtors who weren't getting 5 and 6 leads a month like most of my contemporaries here off of the internet. They were getting 100, 150 leads a month off the internet. And I thought, I got to find out, how does this happen? How do you do that? So we learned, we went to a lot of conferences and read books and webinars and everything and learned how to generate that. And now we generate, for the last 10 years, we've been generating between 100 and 180 leads, buyer leads per month. So that's why we need 3 full-time buyers agents who work just with buyers, because we're overwhelmed with buyers, which is a wonderful thing. And of course, the sellers love that.
Yes.
But so readers are leaders and learners are leaders.
That's right.
I like that. I like that.
And
never heard that before.
And Turner's a learner. So, got a question for you. Help us see like the perfect client. Tell us a success story recently that you're proud of.
Well, yesterday, about back in January, we had a guy who, trying to think, he contacted us through our website, bought ended up coming down, bought a house, and then he told his friend about us because he was impressed with the way we handled things and so on. Told his friend about us, and the friend then called and said, "Hey, I'd be interested in talking to you. I'm not going to buy for 5 years, but I'd just kind of like to get an idea of what's for sale, and can you kind of give me some the lay of the land?" So we did all that on the phone and with FaceTime. Well, we did all that on the phone and helped him see that maybe it would be beneficial for him to buy now rather than waiting for 5 years. And there were all kinds of benefits to that price and everything. What he wanted to buy was very rare, and rare things go up faster than things that are common. And so he began to believe that maybe it would be better for him to buy now rather than waiting for 5 years. And then we did FaceTime tours. He couldn't come down because of the coronavirus. So we did FaceTime tours of lots, and he ended up buying a $500,000 lot, never having seen it.
Wow.
And part of that was trust. Part of that was trust. He felt like we cared and wanted the best for him. And we do, and we definitely do. So anyway, that's a little story that just happened.
That's crazy to think that you wouldn't have to travel and that you could carve out a little time, get to go see all these different lots just through FaceTime, and then get back to whatever you're doing back at the house.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
I love that. So what's one question I haven't asked that you would like for me to ask, Rick?
Let's see. I don't know, Steve. I think you've asked great questions. Part of this whole love thing is, is you got to love what you do.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I would say another question that you could ask, and I'll ask it and then I'll answer it, is how do you become passionate about what you do.
Yeah.
Because that's the, you got the logos, that's the pathos, that's the emotion, that's the passion. How do you become passionate? And one of the greatest books for anybody to read, other than maybe I don't know, maybe a scientist, okay, wouldn't need to read this book, but it was published back in the 1930s, and the name of the book is How I Raised Myself from a Failure to a Success in Selling by Frank Bettger. And Frank Bettger was a total failure, and I won't tell you the whole story, but he was a total failure as a salesperson. He was a total failure as a baseball player. I mean, not a total, he got into the minors, and he was a failure as a baseball player. And his coach challenged him to become full of energy and enthusiasm for the game. And he did, and ended up almost made it to the majors, and then got injured and didn't make it into the majors. So he went into selling insurance. Same thing. He was a total loser as an insurance salesman. and he except he was a very good salesperson of selling all of his stuff. He was selling furniture and everything just to put food on the table. And he went back in the 30s. He went to a Dale Carnegie class taught by Dale Carnegie. And Dale Carnegie was talking about energy and enthusiasm. And he said, Dale Carnegie said, if you don't feel enthusiastic, fine, act enthusiastic. And this is another little axiom of my life. Act enthusiastic, and you will become enthusiastic in your heart, in your gut. And so Frank Bettger, did that the next day. The class was at night the next day, and he became, within a year or two, the #1 life insurance salesman in the world through energy and enthusiasm, passion. Okay. And so I was a failure selling Bibles door to door in Greenville, South Carolina. And I read that chapter sitting on the front stoop of a little store. That back then they didn't have a gas station with a 7-Eleven behind it. They just had, maybe they had, I guess they had those a little bit, but mostly just little stores, selling what you'd get in a 7-Eleven, but not fancy, just little mom and pop stores. And I went in there and got myself an RC Cola and a moon pie. And I sat on that stoop, and I'm feeling like what a loser I am. And I had some tears in my eyes, thinking I'm a 19-year-old loser. And I read that chapter from Frank Bettger's book, and it electrified me. I thought, well, I can act enthusiastic, and I did, and became a very successful book salesman that summer, in the top 20 first-year agents out of 5,000 students, and so on. And it happened in a moment in time, with tears in my eyes, moon pie in my mouth, and an RC Cola in my hand, and a book in the other hand. And it happened in the twinkling of an eye. So I'm a great believer in energy and enthusiasm. And when you act that way, you become that way, and then everything's different. I mean, I go home and I act enthusiastic about seeing my wife, and then I feel enthusiastic about seeing her, so it affects everything.
That's an awesome story. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for that. Rick, if we've been listening to this and we happen to be someone that is wanting to sell their home or have been considering some place to end up and live in a postcard like world, how do they get hold of you? How do they contact you?
Well, it's Rick Turner. And if you Google Rick Turner, Hilton Head Island, or there's a town just across the Intercoastal Waterway from Hilton Head called Bluffton, but Rick Turner, Hilton Head Island, they'll see me. I'm all over there. My phone number, if anybody wanted to write it down, would be 843-816-0796. And then my email address is rickturner@turnerruddgroup.com.
That's right. They also have a website.
Yep.
turnerruddgroup.com.
turnerruddgroup.com.
And you're on LinkedIn as well, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah. And Facebook and everywhere.
Rick, you've been an awesome guest. I love introducing folks to our audience. They want to learn. They enjoy hearing other business leaders and what they've gone through. And I've enjoyed this conversation so much. Thanks for being on the ROI Online Podcast.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me.